Oil is down by more than $1 per barrel U.S. in early trade due to a number of central banks raising key interest rates, fueling fears of a worldwide recession. Chicago soy oil is lower, while European rapeseed and Malaysian palm oil are both higher. The Canadian dollar is down by more than 0.2 of a U.S. cent from Thursday's close. The January canola contract is down $6.30 per ton at $861.70, while the March canola contract is down $4.80 per ton at $853.90. In the U.S., corn, soybeans, and wheat were all trading in the red. The USDA announced on Thursday morning a sale of 101,600 tons of corn to Mexico for this marketing year. The two countries are currently in discussions after Mexico announced its plans to ban genetically modified corn imports for human consumption, which the U.S. believes to be in violation of the USMCA. Argentina's corn crop is estimated to be nearly 43% planted, below the 47% planted at this point last year due to dry weather conditions and sporadic rainfall. Weather concerns also pose a threat to the corn crop in southern Brazil. The March corn contract is down 1 U.S. cent per bushel at $6.53. Dry weather is also threatening Argentina's soybean crop, which is estimated to be nearly 51% planted, down from 65% last year. The NOPA crush report on Thursday showed that 179.2 million bushels of U.S. soybeans were crushed in November, 2 million below trade expectations, but the third highest November on record. Crushed U.S. soybeans are worth $3.33 U.S. per bushel higher than those that are uncrushed, an extremely high profit margin. The January soybean contract is down 1 U.S. cent per bushel at $14.73. Canadian wheat exports totaled 336,600 tons in the latest reported week by the Canadian Grain Commission, with this year's total exceeding 18 million. Below normal precipitation is expected for the U.S. Southern Plains over the next 30 to 90 days, while there is a winter kill risk in hard red wheat growing areas. India's Ag Ministry stated that its planted wheat area is 3% higher than last year's amount. The March Chicago wheat contract is down 2 U.S. cents per bushel at $7.55. The March Kansas City hard red wheat contract is down 9 U.S. cents per bushel at $8.52. The March Minneapolis spring wheat contract is down 6 U.S. cents per bushel at $9.11. That's a look at the ICE futures in U.S. markets for Friday, December 16th. In Winnipeg for MarketsFirm.com, I'm Adam Pilasciati.
The weather forecast is calling for more and more snow. It's with a sigh that you think about all the time that you're going to be spent moving it. The medication you'll need to numb the pain in your lower back from shoveling. Well, Butler Farm Equipment is your pain relief. They have lots of ways to move snow, gravel, dirt, and sand. Pretty much anything can be moved with the right equipment from Butler Farm Equipment. As a matter of fact, with the right equipment, the job could become so fun that you'll want to do your neighbors as well. Moving snow is just the beginning at Butler Farm Equipment on 107th Street.
The opinions expressed during this show do not represent those of this station. If you've missed any of this show, you can follow the podcast at Energeticcity.ca. Now, an in-depth look at the news and information shaping our community. This is Moose Talks with your host, Doug Craig, on Moose FM.
Welcome to the show. Later we'll be chatting with Taylor Behn-Tsakoza, Fort Nelson First Nations member, who is the BC Assembly of First Nations Youth Representative. She went with the delegation to meet with Pope Francis earlier this year. So we're going to talk a bit about that experience and much, much more. But first, the BC government passed Bill 36 at the end of November. I guess rammed it through might be a little more accurate, which will overhaul the system of professional colleges for healthcare occupations in the province and create a new oversight body that will regulate them, among other changes. To talk a bit about the bill and the enormous response he received about it, we're joined now by Peace River North MLA Dan Davies. Dan, welcome back to Moose Talks.
Good morning, Dub.
Thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So let's break down the bill a bit if we can first. Really simply put, as I understand it, it'll reorganize the current system of professional colleges governing health professionals in BC, making it into 6 instead of the 20-ish it is now, and there will be one larger oversight body on top of it run by the government. Health Minister Adrian Dix says the legislation will streamline the process to regulate new health professions, provide stronger oversight, provide more consistent discipline across the professions, act in the public interest, and protect patient care in the province, while also laying the groundwork for to further reduce the total number of regulatory colleges.
I missed that. Can you say that again?
So what's this really about, if you can break this down
So
for us?
there's a lot of pieces, and I want to back up a little bit at the start of the bill, the introduction of the bill, or what the fall session looked like at the end, and you alluded to it in your opening comments, rammed it through. And that's exactly what happened. This was, I think, one of the biggest, if not the biggest bill ever introduced into the BC legislature.
Wow.
It was 600, I think it was 600 sections long. The thing was, half a foot thick, the binder. It took up a whole binder itself. And so obviously our role as the official opposition is to treat that with rigor, to go through each section to make sure that we are doing our best to put that second lens on it, making sure that we're looking out for the interests of not only the public, but our constituents. Each of us represent ridings. And, unfortunately, we only got, I'm not even sure we made it a quarter of the way through the bill before they brought in what is called closure. Or the guillotine. And it's literally that. They basically say you have 1 more hour left. Good luck. And they bring through. And of course, the NDP do have the majority, a fairly hefty majority in the BC legislature. So when that came up, of course, we did oppose and said that we do need more time. It went through. The guillotine went through. We debated for an hour. And for whatever reason, there seems to be a misconception out there that we all voted in favor of it. That is not true. The official opposition did completely oppose it. All members opposed it. We took that stance. And we took that stance because a number of reasons. First of all, we did not get the chance to properly go through the bill, to scrutinize it, and obviously to do what's in the best interest of British Columbians. So the government basically used their majority to ram this through the legislature. So back to the bill itself. There are a number of colleges in the province. The government's plan is to reduce those down and streamline it into something smaller. There are a couple good things in it. I mean, every bill has obviously good things to it as well. I mean, to streamline the international health practitioners that come from other countries, there was pieces like that. But like I say, our biggest issue that we had around this is we've seen this government not do very well when they have oversight. And, we've seen, whether it's, talking just something regionally or locally, the caribou issue, how they've stick handled that. It's been a disaster. Backcountry access, the snowmobile challenge. I mean, these are things that our government is overseeing. Well, here we are now talking a system that is already quite fragile, our health system, and we're going to now have more government insight. But the government can't do its job right now. And I think this is what concerns us a lot, is when we start looking at, what is this going to look like? And we never had the chance to even ask those questions. So, we have a lot of concerns about how the government is going to implement this. What are the long-term consequences, or the unintended consequences that might come out of this Bill 36?
So this definitely, again, you're in opposition, so your job is to oppose the government, but this needed more time because it was so
100%.
enormous. It's such a big change. Yeah. Why are they ramming through at the end of the session? I mean, one of the parts that really stood out to me was the fact that boards of these colleges, I guess, will now be government appointed rather than elected.
Yeah, what could go wrong there?
Right.
What could go wrong there?
I assume now they're elected by the members of each college. And now the government's, no, we're just going to make this a board appointment, which, could mean it's their friends. It could mean anything, right? As well-intentioned as it may be.
Where have we seen other boards go bad? Let's say BC Housing. The government appointed a new BC Housing board, and, it was the shortest-lived board appointed because they were a disaster. So you can see when we start getting these little flags, rising up, it's like, well, what is this going to look like? Here's a government that can't organize, the simplest of things in many cases, now wanting to interject into a system that, they've been in charge of for now almost 6 years, that has completely been run into the ground. John Horgan said himself, I mean, the healthcare system is crumbling. It is a system that's on life support systems itself. And when you get a bill like Bill 36 that, with the wide-reaching fingers that it has into all these different pieces, maybe now's not the time to be starting to fiddle around with, those pieces. Let's look at the issues. There's bigger issues to fry within the healthcare system right now. Let's get hiring people into those frontline services, more nurses, more doctors. And there has been some improvements made, but we have a long ways to go.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned
those are issues
with the I'm going to use the incorrect term, but with the kind of international people, bringing people in from outside the country. You said this bill will help streamline that process a bit, which is good news, because in theory, it'll get people into these open positions, of which there's hundreds of them, faster.
Yeah, and we have, and there is, like I say, there are good pieces to it. Don't get me wrong, and Shirley Bond, our health critic, did an incredible job. As you can imagine, when we get first reading, and this might have been where some of the confusion was on the first reading of the bill. We all vote in favor because that is procedure, right? Because you don't know what's in the bill. The bill's read a first time, you vote to move it into where you can now look at it. So, we all did vote in favor of that to see what the bill looks like, because you don't get the bill until it's first read. And then you start looking at the sheer size of this bill. And, Shirley Bond, the MLA for Prince George Prince George Valemont, who's our health critic, did an unbelievable job at going through the bill as best she could, and doing as best she could with what little time we were giving. And they pulled this same stuff on numerous bills at the very end, and they even introduced the last week of session on Tuesday. They introduced 2 large housing bills. That's unheard of. When we were already being squished for time on I think there were 7 bills that were still being debated. They introduced 2 more. Like, it was so disorganized. So planned. Even I think Bill 36, how it was planned out, like, okay, this is gonna, we'll be able to just push this through because we're gonna run out of time. And it didn't help them taking a week off the week before as well, and that doesn't help, obviously.
Right. I did want to talk about the response you got to this, because this one really surprised me a bit. Your portfolio is poverty and social development. So when you had said you got some 700 emails about this, I said, well, you're not even the health critic, and you got this response. What was the response, and who are you hearing it from that was so enormous?
Yeah, well, excuse me. What we see on a lot of these bills is, and not all 700 were local residents. In fact, a small fraction of those were local, but there were a number of local people as well. And as we go through it, we get on these email chains that's sent to every MLA in the province. But a lot of people were worried about the government piece, the appointed part, taking autonomy away from a number of these colleges. There was, I think, confusion around what the COVID requirements were, the vaccination, I should say, requirements were. So those were kind of I would say those were the pieces that we were hearing about from across the province, and they were from your average person on the street to some people that were working within within the profession themselves. So we were hearing quite a bit. As you can imagine, it's quite difficult to reply to every single one of those. We did have kind of a blanket response. My focus is trying to bring out the local ones and make sure that we do address local constituent concerns.
So then, have you? I think you said this already. You have heard from some people who are members of these colleges. What have you heard from them? Are they upset that there's going to be an amalgamation?
Yeah, and I think, and again, let's look at what we've seen in the past as a pattern of poor consultation. Yeah. And I think that's probably the biggest piece that's been missing out of this, is a failure to go deep and consult. I mean, you're now talking about going into someone's profession and disassembling what has been. And to do that with little or limited consultation isn't fair to anybody concerned. And again, when you do that, you rightly so, you get people backed into a corner. And there's that kind of fight or flight. It's like, hey, this is my livelihood. What is happening here? So I think that's probably one of the big challenges that we've seen on and on and on again with this present government is a failure to consult, certainly a failure to consult with the right people.
Do you think this is more palatable, this bill would be more palatable? Of course, if we had time to actually debate it in the House.
Yeah.
But if this oversight body didn't have government appointed board, would that make more sense to you in the Liberal Party, even if you're philosophically opposed to more government in general?
Well, let's say on the surface, probably more so. Yeah. But let's talk to the colleges. Let's go to the colleges and say, okay, there are a number of colleges here working independently of each other. We've heard from constituents across the province that it's creating X problem. How do we fix it? Come to us with solutions. We'll work with you with solutions. Let's take the solutions from the people that are in the profession, as opposed to having bureaucrats and government folks saying this is what's best for you, because again, it hasn't worked. We need to be engaging people. We need to be engaging stakeholders that work within whatever it is, and in this case, Bill 36, the Health Professions Act. But in anything, we need to be engaging the right people to make sure that we are getting good policy, making sure that we are creating good legislation that in turn is going to have long-term positive results, not this unknown. Because right now there's a lot of unknown. We don't know. Today, we are in a healthcare crisis right now. We don't know, and nor do we expect that this is going to be a fix. Well, it's probably not going to make any difference. If not, there could be some unintended consequences down the road. So it's probably not the right time to be bringing in a piece of legislation like this. And certainly back to your other piece, just the fact of if we had enough time to debate the bill, introduce amendments, hey, this doesn't work, because our job as opposition is also, we do reach out to the colleges and say, hey, this bill's on the floor. What's your thoughts? How can we make it better? How can we help you get your voice into this bill? And oftentimes this is where we do bring, in fact, we did early on in the bill, and I can't remember what it was, but we did bring an amendment in that was passed and accepted. So we do have that ability as opposition to make amendments, that often we bring from our stakeholders that we hear from. And if we had more time, we probably could have, made improvements to the bill. But holy man, the size of this bill, I mean, we would have needed a long time to go through it. I mean, it was a massive bill. No one's ever seen one this big.
Wow, unbelievable. All right, Dan, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for being on the show again, and happy holidays to you.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, all the other things in between, and most importantly, spend some time with family and loved ones.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dan. That's Dan Davies, the Peace River North MLA. We'll be right back to talk to Taylor Behn-Tsakoza right after this on Moose Talks. Get rid of all that road grime and salt this winter with Mick Suds Truck and Car Wash. With their 8-function wash bays and indoor vacuums, you won't have to spend any time out in the cold. Plus, the Mick Suds storefront is loaded with detailing supplies, air fresheners, and some winter necessities like lock de-icer and winter window wash. Keep your vehicle nice and clean this winter with Mick Suds Truck and Car Wash on Alaska Road next to McDonald's. The one to get her done, Mick Suds Truck and Car Wash.
When you feel like debt is holding you back, you can trust the local experts at Beverly & Associates to help find the right solution. Our licensed insolvency trustees have been helping Northern BC for more than 25 years. We offer free debt consultations without obligation or judgment, whether it's in person or from the comfort and privacy of your home. Together, we can get you on a path to a brighter, debt-free future. Visit debthelpbc.com for more information. We are Beverly & Associates, licensed insolvency trustees, and we can help.
Personal, powerful conversations that deserve to be listened to. Before the Peace is a new podcast now available on all major platforms that highlights Indigenous voices in Northeast BC. Before the Peace will take you on a journey with an Indigenous lens on the history in the Peace region. We touch on the triumphs and trials of some well-known leaders of Treaty 8 territory. We chat about Indigenous influencers on TikTok, identity, the first settlers of the Peace, and so much more. Thank you to our sponsors, Troyer Ventures and Epscan Industries, for funding such an important project, as well as Click for their support. Subscribe today at energeticcity.ca/podcasts.
No need to make an appointment at the Hair-Bins Barbershop. Just walk right in, and one of their many talented barbers will make you look like $1,000,000 for the holiday season. Take advantage of the Hair-Bins 12 Days of Christmas, starting December 12th, with daily specials posted on Facebook and Instagram to help you check off everyone on your Christmas list. People's Choice for Best Beauty Salon and Spa 2022 on Facebook and hairbin.com.
Watch this show live on Facebook or download the podcast at Energeticcity.ca.
Welcome back to the show. Now we're going to talk with somebody who is interesting in general. They are a member of the Fort Nelson First Nations, and I've lost my notes here. My apologies. Also a BC Assembly of First Nations youth representative who went with the delegation to meet with Pope Francis earlier this year. We're very glad to be joined now by Taylor Behn-Tsakoza, who calls us from Fort Nelson. Taylor, welcome to Moose Talks.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us today. As I said, you're a youth representative with the BC Assembly of First Nations. I was just kind of curious how that came about in your life. How did you come to get that opportunity to be that?
Yeah, so I actually got this during the pandemic. And I remember seeing on Facebook that the female youth representative position was becoming open, and that they were looking for young First Nations women in BC to put their name forward and to be considered for the chiefs to decide who they thought was going to best represent them and youth in this province. And so I approached my chief counselor, Charlene Gale, expressing interest, that I was like, I would really like to do this. Can you support me in this? And she did. And I got to attend their AGM in the fall of 2020. And I was out of 5 amazing other young women that could have been chosen. The chiefs and assembly chose me, and it was really, it was quite the honor, and it still is. So that's kind of how I started this journey with this BC Assembly First Nations.
And what's sort of your role then? I mean, as you said, you attended the AGM. I assume that's one part, but that's only part of kind of what you do. Can you tell us a bit about kind of, kind of the other things you're kind of responsible for, kind of the normal things, if we want to call it that?
Yeah, for sure. And thinking back to like when I first, was thinking about putting my name forward, I didn't really know what this position entailed, other than, I know that the Assembly First Nation as a whole is an advocacy body for First Nations in Canada, with the different levels of government. And so I was like, okay, I think, as the youth representative, maybe I'll be a part of those advocacy efforts. And I couldn't even tell you what a day in the life looks like because it varies. But basically, I get to attend a lot of meetings, both internally with the BC Assembly First Nations, the National Assembly First Nations in Ottawa, and then with a lot of different partners, government. And I get to go to a lot of events, which is fun. And I think my favorite part of the job is engaging with youth across the province. And because I represent BC as the youth representative at the national level, we have the National Youth Council at the Assembly of First Nations. So I also get to engage with the other youth representatives from across the country. And so, it's just a lot of, talking, listening, and, providing my input when the opportunity arises.
Can you tell me a bit about sort of why you decided to kind of leap at this chance, even when, as you said, you didn't even really know what it entailed? Well, what kind of led you to a moment where you said, I'd love to be an advocate and maybe on a larger scale than perhaps I'm already, or on a different scale even than I maybe already am in my life?
Yeah. growing up, my mom was chief for, I think it was 2 terms when I was growing up. So, my siblings and I were those kids underneath the table coloring, listening. My grandfather was also the chief of Fort Nelson First Nation for, I think it was like a cumulative of 30 plus years. And yeah, my grandfather was also the grand chief of the Treaty 8 Tribal Association in Fort St. John. So I grew up around this environment of, recognizing the importance of having First Nations voices at the table. And so I think all of that combined with, I graduated from my health and physical education degree in April of 2020, right at the start of the pandemic. And so when I saw this come up, I think it was November was when I was elected. So I had a few months there of like, what am I going to do next? What should I be doing? And so, yeah, I thought that, I think this was maybe the next step in my life and what, and kind of shifting my path, because I was dedicated to school for so many years, and I knew that I wanted to take all that experience and do something with it. And and so I did.
As I understand it, sport is kind of a big part of your advocacy, isn't it?
Very big, yeah. It's, I think reflecting on my own story and journey to even getting to being at the Assembly First Nation, sport was a big part of that. And, growing up in Fort Nelson in the north, sport was just, what kept me on that, the straight and narrow, that path that was, that taught me discipline and teamwork and all the, the great skills that come with being part of a team. And so I always try to bring, those lessons and my experience as an athlete to the different things that I get to be a part of. And it's really cool. I'm glad, I'm able to create space for like that part of me that's still, that I'm so passionate about.
So this all sort of leads to what happened to you earlier this year, because you were part of the delegation that went to Rome to meet with Pope Francis. Tell me a bit about that journey, if you could, and sort of what that meant to you, that you would be essentially granted an audience with him to sort of say the things you needed to say, which was you need to work on reconciliation. You and the church need to apologize and these sort of things. Tell me a bit about that experience.
Yeah. It's crazy to think that it's almost been a year since, since we traveled to the Vatican, to have that audience with Pope Francis. And I, thinking back to it, and it was a year ago, like around this time, like October, November, December of 2021, that conversations were ramping up, that I got the news that I was going, that, we were working with comms to kind of build our messaging. And my parents didn't want me to go. I come from a family of survivors. I'm a niece of residential school survivors. My aunties and uncles attended Lower Post residential school on the BC-Yukon border, and my dad is a day school survivor. And I just remember feeling, though, that, this trip was so much bigger than just me, and that the AFN was looking for a youth voice, for this, for a young person to go and to share with Pope Francis, their own stories, and the importance of having intergenerational survivors as a part of this, these efforts to, move this country and our relationship between First Nations and the church and government and all, the people that have done so wrong to us, that young voice needed to be part of that. And when the opportunity arose, I knew that even though my parents were very adamant in expressing why they thought I shouldn't go, I knew in my heart that I needed to be there, and that my story, coming from the north, coming from a family of survivors, and kind of using my story as a way to tell the church, like, you didn't win and your efforts failed. I'm a first generation university graduate. I'm a homeowner in my community. I'm breaking all these, harmful cycles that were imposed on my people and my family. And so I just thought that I brought value to that delegation that went to the Vatican, and I'm really proud of everything that as a group we were able to accomplish. But myself, as someone from Fort Nelson that was able to be there, was really something special, and something that, again, I'm just really, really honored to have been a part of.
Mm-hmm. Now, I also wanted to ask you about this as well. We only got a couple minutes left here, sadly. As I understand it, you went to the United Nations Climate Change Conference at the end of November. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah, I traveled to Egypt. It was quite... If you ever get the chance, highly suggest. Egypt is amazing.
Well, tell me a bit about your experience then. Again, I mean, it's not the Pope, but you're again in front of like world leaders and this sort of situation. What was your experience like there, and what did you take away from that?
Yeah, so back in November, I actually just got home like last week, but I attended the Conference of the Parties, so COP 27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, and it's the big United Nations Climate Change Conference. It's where the entire world comes together to talk about climate change and, things that countries are going to agree to do to kind of combat, the issues that are arising from climate change. And again, I was chosen as the Assembly of First Nations youth representative to go, and being there is quite the emotional roller coaster. I got to, meet with mostly Indigenous communities from around the world, but everyone was there, so you get snippets throughout the day of what's going on, and like hearing about what Pacific people in the Pacific are experiencing. Their islands are disappearing at rapid rates, and a big part of COP27 was about loss and damage, and how globally we're going to support communities that their entire countries are going to be underwater. Where are they going to go? How are we going to support them? And continuing to live and to survive in this world where their land is like no longer there. So it was like those parts made me really sad, and I was like, we're this whole climate change and global warming and the devastating effects that we felt here in BC with the wildfires, floods, drought, and bringing our story was quite empowering. So it was an emotional roller coaster to say the least. But I'm really excited now to continue climate change work, both hopefully here in our province and nationally with the AFN. So it was it was fun.
Excellent. Well, Taylor, I'm really sad to say we're out of time. I'm definitely going to ask you to be on Moose Talks again in the future. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes chat with us today. I really appreciate it, your time.
Thank you. And I really appreciate having the regional support and for being given the opportunity to share a bit about my journey so far and the things that I've been able to do. And it's quite an honor to be here as well, and just thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to be a part of it. Thanks, Taylor. Nice meeting you.
Thanks.
All right, that's Taylor Behn-Tsakoza, the BC Assembly of First Nations Youth Representative. We'll be right back to wrap things up on Moose Talks right after this.
Wash your car in one click with the new Co-op Car Wash app. There are 2 ways to save using the app. Get a subscription for up to 4 washes per month at almost half the price. Or purchase 5 single washes and get the 6th one free. There are 2 ways to save at the 100th Street Co-op Car Wash location. The choice is yours.
Download the Co-op Car Wash app today and use code CARWASH5 for a discount.
Win cold hard cash with Brad's Furniture and Appliances. Hit the mark. Listen for your cue to call. Ho, ho, ho. And dial 250-787-2222. Hit the Mark is here until December 23rd and just in time for the holidays. Brad's Furniture and Appliances Hit the Mark is powered by Vol Jones, Veronica's Closet, Butler Farm Equipment, FSJ Return It, Red Barn Eatery, and Chance's Casino FSJ. our community first. This is Moose Talks with Dub Craig on Moose FM.
Our thanks to our guests Dan Davies and Taylor Behn-Tsakoza for joining us today. This is the last episode of Moose Talks for a few weeks, but if you're missing us and this beautiful face and voice, you can check out older episodes along with other excellent podcasts on the Energetic City podcast page. Just head over to Energeticcity.ca for your listening pleasure. We'll be back with a brand new episode in the new year. Moose Talks is produced by Jordan Prentice and Trey Lopashinsky. I'm Dub Craig. Happy holidays and be well.
Join us next Friday at 10 a.m. for another episode of Moose Talks, a weekly talk show about Fort St. John and the North Peace. DGS Astro